Hello and welcome back to Exothermic Plays Games. I spent all of 2024 doing a daily countdown of my favorite video games of all time, and now I'm back with another installment of my ongoing ranking series. I'm very excited about today's game, given it's the origin point for 4 games in my top 10. Today, I'm delighted to see how it holds up as I answer the question, why do I like Warcraft, Orcs and Humans?
The victor claiming dominance over the whole of Azeroth. Welcome to the world of Warcraft.
If you're somehow at this video without having any idea what this game is, Warcraft Orcs and Humans is the first real-time strategy game developed by Blizzard Entertainment, who then went on to make multiple other Warcraft titles and multiple StarCrafts. And then eventually World of Warcraft, of course, when they took it into the big world of MMOs and revolutionized that genre as well. First things first though, you might be looking at this video and think, this game looks great for being a DOS release from 1994. And that's because I'm actually playing Warcraft 1 Remastered. If you want to play the old interface and appearance, there's actually a toggle for that, but you should really play the remaster. There's a lot of upscaled visuals, remastered audio, and the like. However, the gameplay is almost identical, so it's safe to call this representative for the original release as well. There is one noteworthy difference though. In the original DOS release, you could only select 4 units at a time, but more importantly, you couldn't have control groups. The remaster is much more in line with something like, say, Warcraft 3, where you can control multiple groups of up to 12 units at a time, and can also put one building at a time on a control group for ease of production. These are nice to have and make the game a little less clunky, but ultimately they're not game-breakingly large advantages due to all of the other ways that this game is old as shit! Now, I think it's important to note that I'm not necessarily saying that as a way to bash the game. I genuinely enjoyed playing this game, and seeing where these games I love got their start, but I'm also, let's go with thankful, that they evolved beyond this one. I'm going to spend some time saying some, not very nice things about the game while I explain mechanics, so if you're not here for that and want to hear the nice things, feel free to check out the description for the timestamp that'll skip straight to the ranking for the game, because I'll say some nice stuff down there. So without any more dillying or dallying, let's get into some gameplay. The first Warcraft game is almost entirely about the campaign play. You can either play, as the name suggests, as orcs or as humans. The world design of Azeroth was not very large yet, but there's nuggets there and things definitely intended to have more to it, but really, both of the campaigns are pretty much the same. They have unique maps, but the objectives are going to mirror each other, and the differences in the maps are pretty superfluous. Also, the units are basically identical. There is a difference, but we'll get to that later, so just pick one. Being the proud member of the Horde that I am, I picked Orcs. There's a lot of things about Blizzard RTS that immediately are recognizable right off the bat. You've got workers that construct buildings and harvest resources. In this case, that's gold and lumber. The first mission is just kind of teaching you how to build a base, so you get to do a bit of that and can build some grunts to defend from some sporadic attacks. It's nothing crazy, but it gives you a feel for some of the controls. The second mission is where things start to get a little interesting, and some of the design elements that are a bit weird to me become apparent. You have to locate and wipe out every opposing structure and unit. In fact, that's common within this campaign, and you'll have to chase down every last thing. It's one of the more annoying aged parts of the game, but it is what it is. Thankfully, it's also not quite as hard as it sounds, because one of the craziest elements to the game that was mind-blowing for me to figure out, coming from a background of these relatively much newer RTS titles, is that your vision is permanent. You don't need to build like watchtowers or stay active on the map or anything else you'd historically need to do to make sure you know there's an attack coming. You just have to have seen that part of the map once, and now you've got vision of that area forever. Given the pace of the unit movement and the economy, I think it works well because you can't exactly react to anything remotely quickly. But it is jarring for someone coming from, these newer games. Some other things that are mind-blowing in their age: you can't expand. You only get one town hall and cannot build new ones. However, if yours gets destroyed, you can at least repair that one, but it's rough. In addition to not having the normal sprawling out on the map nature that a lot of RTS games can let you do, which is something I normally love to do, it also means that once you mine out of what is usually the only nearby gold mine by your starting area, your income takes a massive drop, as the travel time for your workers gets egregiously long. You can run into a similar issue with lumber, but really once you have all of your upgrades done, your lumber needs are admittedly fairly low, so that's not a big deal. If you're worried I'm going to cover every mission, don't worry, I'm not, because there's a lot of similarities between most of them. I am going to cover every unit, however, because there's not actually that many of them, so it won't take too long. This will all be from the orc perspective, but keep in mind that everything I say has a pretty much universally one-to-one human counterpart, except for the difference we'll get to. Grunts are your standard melee fighters. They're just dumb, cheap dudes with axes, and they very much highlight the horrible pathing in this game. It's terrible. Things like to bunch together around corners really, really badly. The game very clearly utilizes a grid system, not only for constructing your buildings, that's normal, but also for when enemies fight each other. Everyone's gonna stand in a formation during combat, and grunts will absolutely get wailed on while they work into their spots. Like if you have grunts surrounding one unit on all sides, they will obviously be in a very clean 3x3 grid. It's very clunky. Because of this, apart from the very early game, they're not really what you want to make. What you want is spearmen. These are unlocked by constructing a lumber mill and have a decent ranged attack. Getting several of these together makes quick work of all of the very clunky, horribly moving melee fighters, rendering them fairly useless in most circumstances. Almost all of the missions I did were won by making a giant amount of spearmen and then just throwing them at stuff, which is obviously not that exciting of a strategy. You can make raiders, which are basically stronger orcs with more health, on wolves. They're a little faster, they have more health, they hit harder. Having a couple of those, depending on the map, isn't awful, because they do move fast, so they get to cover some of the problems of grunts just slowly walking to their death, but they have similar, if not worse, pathing issues. So I wouldn't make more than like a few of them. Their extra health is fairly important against some units, so they do have a spot. In addition to throwing all of my money into spearmen and maybe a few raiders, I dumped large amounts of gold into upgrades. These are very, very expensive. The scaling of upgrades to unit costs is wild, but they can go a long way. If you just prioritize getting extra damage and armor for your spearmen, that's usually all you need. I like that the upgrades feel impactful and make economy management in this otherwise one-dimensional combat feel really important due to their cost. The next unit I want to talk about is the bane of my existence. Oh my god, catapults are bullshit. They're very slow, they're awkward to control, and they hit insanely hard, one-shotting the majority of units in large AoE clumps. That last part seems great and like you should make them, right? Wrong! They have friendly fire, and because they move and fire so slowly, you pretty much have to suicide them in solo. But their projectile also has a travel time, so sometimes you just don't hit much and throw away your production time and, did I mention tons of money? You see, you can't just sit back in this game. You have objectives you need to complete. You can't really play that defensively. But you know who doesn't need to do that? The enemy, they can just sit there and defend and occasionally send out a strike force of a few units. Actually, it's almost always 4, I think, because of the original control. You could only select 4 units at a time. They didn't change that. And maybe they'd have one of these. You have to make sure you're really on top of it and be prepared to lose a lot of units potentially to the catapult. But cracking defenses with these is way worse than defending against them. There is a mission where they just park a bunch of catapults on the other end of a bridge. It's this really narrow choke point, and you have to go across the bridge to get to the objective for the map, and it's the only way across, and they just load it with infinite damage. I mined the entire map so I could throw army after army at these things, and only managed to get the job done because I was sacrificing my only remaining peons into the catapults to soak up shots to then get my actual army in position. It was a rough time. And while I think there's fun missions in this game that down the line I'll go back and actually probably replay them for fun. Like, there's fun stuff to do in the game. That mission is not one of them. Also not one of them is the couple of installation missions. You can't make new units, which is normal in installation missions, but you've got to find objectives and kill, remember, every single thing, often in these winding, horrible caves with the terrible pathing. But the worst mission in the game for me was the 8th mission for the Orc campaign, where you go and save Garona, an important character in the lore and world of Warcraft. She's very important. But there's a ton of slimes and other monsters, and a bunch of humans guarding her. Oh, and this giant fire elemental that's like a catapult with real legs and can move and chase you down and blow up your whole army in seconds. I hate that elemental. This mission was a brick wall that I got over with a lot, and I mean a lot, of save scumming and some very, very lucky kiting, despite the horrendous pathing, while I got the fire elemental to mindlessly chase 2 spearmen forever, while the rest of my group escorted Garona safely to the exit. That's the worst mission because it, more than any of the others, highlighted the issues with the pathing and controls of the game. Did you know that even if you attack move, you'll still try to go to that exact spot and then attack, rather than move to that spot and stop to attack stuff along the way, which is how it works in everything else? I'm glad they figured out a better way to do that, because my muscle memory of 1A click, 2A click, so on, never went away, and I did a lot of throwing units in the garbage because of it. That being said, it being the worst doesn't actually make it the hardest, it's just dumb. Mission 12, the finale, is... wow. I actually gave up. I'm never beating that thing. I've looked up a video of someone beating it to check the final victory scenes and also what the hell I should have been doing, and I do get it now. I could go and beat it if I wanted, but I don't really like that strategy, to be honest. It's kind of boring. But I also don't care enough to subject myself to even more time on that map than I've already done. Basically, as the Orcs, you have to take out 3 fully fortified human bases that are all attacking you at the same time as they defend themselves. This map has some of the same choke point catapult issues, but you can at least more easily deal with them because there's different ways you can get to any of the important areas, so you can like draw the catapults away from their defensive position, then sweep in with other stuff. So you can actually have very strategic workarounds that, when you do it right, actually feel pretty great. But what this mission is really defined by, especially now that I see what I should have been doing, is the spellcasters. These are the last 2 units for me to talk about. Orcs get Necrolytes and Warlocks, who each get their own spells, which are different than the human Clerics and Conjurers. There's some functional overlap, like Necrolytes and Clerics can both heal, and Conjurers and Warlocks both focus on summoning things. But the specifics are fairly different, which is quite literally the only asymmetry in the design of this game's only 2 factions. It normally takes a lot of money to unlock some of these spells, but in this mission, you just start with having them. The biggest spell that the Warlock gets summons a giant demon, and the cleric summons a giant elemental, and these things are tough, and they're sent at you in waves from several angles. I am so close to actually loving this mission, but the difficulty of pathing and not being able to properly expand my economy is too much of a pain point and caused me to want to rip my hair out. But you know what's even more painful than any of this campaign stuff? The 1v1 custom games. Good God. You can't actually play against other people in Warcraft, Orcs, and Humans, but can play against the PC. The problem is, and I didn't realize what was happening at first, so I was like, oh my god, how are they doing this? Is that you and the opponent do not start with the same things. There's all of these sliders you can do to adjust starting units, but they're actually only changing things for you. So if you're going to do this, definitely give yourself a bunch of stuff. Your opponent starts with a whole base and a bunch of units. Sure, I can try to set it to be the same. I'm sure look it up and see what the numbers are to make it like equal footing, or give a handicap in either direction. But ultimately, I just don't care enough to have to create such a facade of balance to even bother, which is ultimately fine, because it'd probably just be making a lot of spearmen anyways. So I've talked about all of the mechanics, all of the units, in much of the campaign. I guess it's time to rank this game and maybe be a little positive. Warcraft Orcs and Humans is my new 236th favorite video game of all time. It's wedged between Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 at 235 and Sonic Generations at 237. Some other nearby titles include Final Fantasy 3 at 234, Pokemon Coliseum at 239, the first title in another large Blizzard franchise with the original Diablo at 242, and also notably another RTS at 243 with Halo Wars. Now, I spent much of this video pretty much just bashing Warcraft. Obviously, it's way lower than the other Blizzard RTS titles on the list. But what it's got going on that puts it above like another 150 games on there, it really is just the formula that the game has. I really do think that for fans of any of the Warcraft games, or in a broader sense, just real-time strategy at all, the game is still a must play, if nothing else to appreciate what's come after it. They got the concept right from the very beginning. They just lacked the technology and implementation. Making workers, building a base, making an army, and fighting a foe that's doing the same still can feel great and rewarding. Even with the incredible clunk, I still prefer making workers and having them work compared to an auto-mining structure, like for example in Halo Wars, despite most of the rest of that game feeling much better. And the soul of Warcraft, worth mentioning, is present in this game. The story introduces, even though it's very vague and entirely just dialogue, it's all talking, and not a lot of it. The Shadow Council, the Dark Portal, several critically important locations and characters, and definitely the goofy, cartoonish tone of Azeroth. The intangibles are actually one of the game's greatest strengths. I actually love the art design of most of the units and scenery. It's all very iconic, and they nailed it on the first try. The music is also, while admittedly lacking in variety, very good, and the sound design is so great. I actually don't mind hearing the same zug 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 dabu lokta sounds constantly. I mean constantly, as you can probably tell in the video, as I move my units around the map. The game's core mechanics and ideas are still excellent, and so it has so many of the things I love about the later titles, but I just so desperately wish that the game's pathing wasn't tied to grid movement, or that you could actually build up your economy more, or there was something to really deal with the ridiculous defender's advantage that catapults provide. It's really backbreaking. Also, I didn't even mention this earlier, but peons literally cannot attack. They can't defend themselves. They just get hit and go, well, I guess I'll run away. By the way, after they get hit, they don't go back to work. Like, you have to find them again, wherever they ran off to. If you killed the attacker before they kill the peon's like, I'm done. bad. They get much better at it in the next one.